Have you ever wanted to implement a GitHub kind of confirm password feature in your AdonisJS application, where users will be required to enter their passwords when performing certain actions on your application? Well, you are in luck, because in this lesson, you are going to learn how to do exactly that. Here I have an AdonisJS application with basic authentication and a user dashboard that is only accessible when the user is logged in. Now, let's assume the dashboard is a sensitive page. We want users to re-enter their password to access. So let's see how we can go about implementing that. We will start by creating the necessary routes. For this, we'll be needing two routes. One to display the page that will show the form where users will enter their passwords. Then the second one will be the one to process the form. Let's head over to the route.cs file. We are going to add it under here, route.get. Let's call it confirm-password. And it will call a confirm password controller, specifically a create method on the controller. The second one will be a post route with the same route pattern, but this time it's going to call a store method on the controller. And we want this route to be accessible to only authenticated users. So we are going to apply the auth middleware to the routes. Next, let's create the controller. Node is make controller. If you take a look at the routes file again, you notice that the routes are namespaced inside the auth directory. So we are going to place the new controller inside the auth directory also. Then we want to use the exact name. Let's open it up and let's create the first method. Inside the method, we will return view.render. The view file will be inside the auth directory. Then the name of the file will be confirm-password. Next, let's create the view file. Instead of having to create the file from scratch, I'm going to duplicate an existing view file. So let's duplicate the login page. The text will be, say, please confirm your password to continue. And for this, we only need just one field, which is the password field. So let's get rid of the other fields. Then the text on the bottom will be confirm password. Let's check this out in the browser. Perfect. Now let's wire it up. The form we submit to the post route we created earlier. So route confirm password controller dot store. Next, let's create the store method. From the context, let's get request, auth, session, and response. All we need to do here is verify the user credentials, that is the email address, which we will get from the currently authenticated user, then the password that the user will supply, which will help us to confirm that, oh, this user is indeed the authenticated user. To undo verifying the user's credentials, we are going to use the verify credentials method on the auth object. So await auth.verify credentials. This accepts two arguments. The first one is the user ID, which in my case is the email address. You can double check the user ID inside the auth config file. As you can see, we can easily get the email address of the authenticated user using auth.user.email. Then the second argument is the password, which you can get from request.input. Then the name of the input field is password. Once the user details has been verified, then we can simply redirect them to their intended URL with return response.intended. If you are wondering where the intended method comes from, you might want to check the Extending AdonisJS course, and specifically the Creating an Intended Response method lesson. But basically, what the intended method does is simply fetch the user intended URL from the session and redirect the user to it. The verify credentials method will throw an exception if the details does not match with what we have in the database. So we need to undo the exception. We can do that by wrapping this inside a try catch block. So try catch. Then inside the catch block, we will simply flash an appropriate message to the session and redirect back to the page. So that is how to confirm users' passwords. But we are not done yet, because as it is, users would need to confirm their password every time they visit the dashboard, which might not be the best of user experience. So what we are going to do is set a kind of timeout after which users will need to reconfirm their passwords. To do that, we need to keep track of when users confirmed their passwords. And for that, we are going to be making use of the session. So right before we redirect the user to their intended URL, we are going to save the time users confirmed their password in the session.put. I'm going to give this a key of password _confirmed_at, and the value will be the current time, which you can get using logzone. So date time has been imported at the top. Then we can call the now method, which will return the current time. Then we will convert it to seconds. Now we have a way of keeping track of when users confirmed their password. What we need to do next is add a way to check the time and ensure it has not elapsed the timeout. For that, we are going to be making use of a middleware. So let's create the middleware. Node is make middleware. We are going to call the middleware confirm password. Next, let's register the middleware inside the kernel.cs file. We're going to register it as a named middleware with the name of confirm password with uppercase P. Next, let's add the implementation for the middleware. Let's get session, request, and response from the context. Then first, we will retrieve the password confirmed at value from the session. So let's call this confirmed at, and that will be equals session.get. Then the key is password underscore confirmed underscore at. If it does not exist in the session, we are going to set the default value to 0. All we need to do now is check that the time the user confirmed the password has not elapsed the timeout we are going to set. For this lesson, we are going to set the timeout to 60 seconds. But in a real world application, you might want to set it to be higher than that. And the check will be date time.now. Again, we're going to convert this to seconds minus the confirmed at time, and we will check if it is greater than 60 seconds. If it is greater than 60 seconds, that means the timeout has elapsed. So we need to redirect the user to reconfirm their passwords. So return response.redirect.toRoute, then confirm password controller.create. But if the timeout has not elapsed, then we will allow the user to proceed to their intended URL. Let's go through this once again to drive it in. First, we retrieve the time when the user last confirmed their password. Then we have an if check that checks if the difference between now and the last time the user confirmed their password is greater than the set timeout, which is 60 seconds. If it is greater, that means the timeout has elapsed, so the user needs to reconfirm their password, which is why we are redirecting them to the confirm password page. Otherwise, that is, if the timeout has not elapsed, then we allow them to proceed with the action they intend to take. The final step is to apply the middleware to the dashboard route. Let's make this an array. Then we will add the confirm password middleware. Now let's test it out in the browser. I'm going to refresh this. Just as we expect, I'm redirected to confirm my password. So I'm going to enter my password. I am redirected to the home page, which is kind of wrong because if we head back to the controller, we said we want to redirect the user to their intended URL. Remember I said the intended method simply fetches the intended URL saved in the session and redirects the user to it. And that is happening inside the auth middleware. And because the request did not touch the auth middleware, so the intended URL is not in the session. So what we need to do is add this implementation inside the confirm password middleware as well. So we are going to add it inside the if check before we redirect the user to reconfirm their password. This should be just request and this just session. Let's retry it again. Again, I'm going to enter my password. And as we expect, we are redirected to the dashboard. If I refresh this a couple of times, and because we are still within the set timeout, we are not redirected to confirm our password. But as soon as the timeout elapses, we will be redirected to confirm our password. Before we wrap up this lesson, let's head over to the auth controller, specifically the destroy method, where we log out users. To be on the safer side, let's remove the password confirmed at time stored in the session. So let's pull in session. Then we can do session.forget. Again, the key is password underscore confirmed underscore at. Now we can be rest assured that when a user logs out, we are not keeping the last time they confirmed their password in the session. So that is how to implement user confirming their password before accessing specific part of your application in AdonisJS.